What does the first day of a war feel like? Is it loud? Is it sudden? Or is it quiet just before the sky breaks? Before the headlines? Before the bloodshed? There was a normal day. And then everything changed. Children laughed in alleyways. Vendors called out fresh fruit prices. Mothers served breakfast. The air smelled of bread and cardamom. Fathers kissed their children goodbye, not knowing it might be the last time. And then came October 7th, 2023. At dawn, the sky above Gaza was still, but war was already on the way. Hamas launched a surprise assault on Israel. Over 2,000 rockets were fired within hours. Gunmen crossed the border through tunnels, by motorcycle, even with motorized paragliders. They attacked towns, homes, civilians. It was swift. It was brutal. It was unlike anything seen in years. And Israel responded with force. Within hours, airstrikes pounded Gaza. Buildings collapsed. Glass shattered for miles. Families screamed. Mothers searched through dust for their children. The war had begun. Gaza lost power. Water stopped running. Hospitals overflowed. Doctors operated by flashlight. Israel declared a state of war. Tanks rolled toward the border. Missile defense systems lit up the sky. Sirens rang across Tel Aviv. Families took shelter. A Palestinian mother said, "We were eating breakfast. Then we were digging through rubble to find our son." An Israeli father said, "I held my daughter in a closet and prayed." In 24 hours, more than 1,000 people were killed, thousands injured, neighborhoods erased, streets turned to graveyards. Social media flooded with images, explosions, crying children, shattered lives. And yet, more rockets flew, more buildings fell, more lives ended. This wasn't just an attack. This was trauma in real time, and the world watched. Some prayed, some took sides, but no one could stop the bombs. In Gaza, mosques fell, homes turned to dust. In Israel, funerals began before the smoke cleared. A child learned the sound of a missile before he learned to write his name. This was the first day, the beginning of what would become a full-scale war, and no one on either side would come out untouched. This story is not about politics. It's about people. Before the missiles, there were meals. Before the tanks, there were toys. Before the fire, there was family. But the fire came, and it burned everything. By nightfall, peace was a memory. Only smoke remained. This was the beginning. Day one. Before they were enemies, they were neighbors. Before the war, they were human. And maybe that's the part we're forgetting. What does justice look like when the sky is on fire? Can defense turn into destruction? Can a response become a reckoning? After the surprise attack by Hamas on October 7th, Israel responded swiftly and with overwhelming force. Within hours, the Israeli Defense Forces launched a full-scale counteroffensive. Airstrikes roared across Gaza. Missile after missile, explosion after explosion. The night sky turned orange. The earth shook, and people ran again. Israel said this was not just a reaction. It was a mission to dismantle Hamas, to eliminate the threat, to restore security. But in Gaza, there was nowhere to hide. The first targets were military, then communication centers, then entire apartment blocks. And soon, it wasn't clear what was military and what was home. Hospitals filled up in hours. Wounded children lined the hallways. Doctors worked nonstop with no rest, no resources, no power. The smell of blood mixed with dust. The cries of mothers echoed through crumbling streets. Gaza, once loud with life, was now a city of silence, interrupted only by screams. Hooking loop? Was this justice? Or was this something else? In Israel, grief turned to rage. People lit candles for the dead, held up pictures of missing loved ones, and demanded answers. The Israeli government mobilized 300,000 reservists, its largest call-up in history. Tanks rolled south. Jets flew constant missions. And military officials declared, this is only the beginning. Meanwhile, in Gaza, the warnings came. Leaflets dropped from the sky. Messages sent to evacuate. But to where? Gaza is sealed. There are no exits. Nowhere is safe. A father held his baby and whispered, "Where do I run with her?" Emotional loop. When every direction leads to death, how do you choose which way to run? Entire neighborhoods disappeared. Homes flattened. Schools hit. Mosques collapsed. The power grid failed. Hospitals went dark. Surgeons used mobile phone lights to operate on children. Water supplies ran dry. Fuel was blocked. Food dwindled. And yet, the strikes didn't stop. Perspective shift. Back in Israel, civilians lived in fear of more rocket attacks. Air raid sirens blared. Children slept in bunkers. Shrapnel pierced kitchens. Smoke rose from towns. Pain, again on both sides. A mother in Tel Aviv said, "I tucked my daughter in underground, not in her bedroom." A man in Gaza said, "We eat once a day and pray we wake up tomorrow." Luke questioned, back to the core conflict. Can you destroy a threat without destroying a people? The death toll rose. First hundreds, then thousands. International voices called for restraint. The UN warned of war crimes. But the missiles didn't pause. Journalists were killed. Ambulances were targeted. Refugee camps were bombed. Children died in their parents' arms. And yet, the world could only watch. Narrator slows, thoughtful, heavy. This wasn't a border conflict anymore. This was a humanitarian collapse. And in the chaos, truth became harder to find. Was that building a military site? Was that family warned? Both sides claimed the other was lying. Both believed they were right. And both bled. Loop, repeat of opening hook. Is this still defense, or has it become devastation? A boy in Gaza picked up the body of his brother. He said nothing. He just walked. The cameras followed him. Millions watched the video. But no one could stop the war. Global reaction segment. Protests erupted in cities across the world. Paris, London, New York, Istanbul. Some waved Palestinian flags. Others held signs that read, "Stand with Israel." But the people inside Gaza and Israel didn't see any of that. They only saw the bombs. They only felt the shaking walls. Narrator quiet, reflective tone. Sometimes war is not about land, not about power, but about people caught in between. People who just want to survive. A farmer who no longer has land. A student who no longer has a school. A mother who no longer has a child. Final loop, emotional callback. Remember the father who kissed his son goodbye on day one? He's still searching for him in the rubble. By the end of the second day, over 2,000 lives were gone, and neither side was finished. The Israeli military said a ground operation was imminent. The people of Gaza braced for something worse, and the world held its breath. Final statement. Sets up next episode. This wasn't just retaliation. It was escalation. And the worst was yet to come. What happens when a city is turned into a cage? When there's no escape, no water, no food, no light, only war. This is not just a battle. This is a siege. On October 9th, 2023, 2 days after the Hamas attack, Israel declared a complete siege on Gaza. Electricity cut. Water shut off. Fuel blocked. Food banned. Aid denied. No way in. No way out. Only darkness. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said, "We are fighting human animals. We will act accordingly." Those words echoed in international headlines. But in Gaza, they became deadly instructions. Power grids collapsed. Water pumps stopped. Hospitals went dark. Children waited for food that never came. Mothers boiled leaves to make soup. Families burned furniture for firewood. Al-Shifa Hospital, Gaza's largest, lost power. Surgeons performed operations by flashlight. Oxygen tanks ran dry. Premature babies were moved by hand. Some did not survive the night. Outside, lines for bread stretched for blocks until the bakeries were bombed. Markets emptied. Shops closed. Garbage piled up. One man said, "We're not living. We're counting days." Families rationed a single bottle of water between 6 people. Food delivery stopped. Aid convoys waited at the Rafah border. filled with supplies, but the gate stayed shut. Egypt demanded safety guarantees. Israel refused to let aid in until hostages were freed. The result? Nothing moved. Meanwhile, the airstrikes didn't stop. Boom, boom, boom. Gaza City shook day and night. Entire neighborhoods vanished. Mosques collapsed. Schools turned to rubble. Shelters became graves. A child said, "I don't sleep anymore. I just wait." As Gaza fell into silence, Israel prepared for its next phase. Tanks and troops lined the southern border. The invasion was coming. The world braced for something worse. But in Gaza, the disaster was already here. 2 million people trapped. Nowhere to run. No fuel. No food. No future. Journalists showed images the world couldn't ignore. A baby crying in the rubble. A mother digging with bare hands. A boy sitting beside the bodies of his family. The UN called it collective punishment. Human rights groups warned of war crimes. But the siege held. Inside the Strip, people no longer asked for peace. They asked for water. Just water. Some drew messages on walls. "We are still alive. We are still human. Please don't forget us." A girl said to a reporter, "If I die, will someone say my name?" The conflict was no longer about politics or land. It was about breath, about hunger, about light. Gaza was dying, slowly, loudly, painfully. And the world? Still watching. In the next part, the invasion begins. Israeli troops enter Gaza, street by street, block by block, and everything changes again. When the skies went quiet, the earth began to shake. It was no longer just airstrikes. Now, the war had boots on the ground. October 27th, 2023, Israel launched its full-scale ground invasion into Gaza. Tanks rolled in through the darkness. Columns of soldiers moved through shattered streets. Their goal, eliminate Hamas. Their challenge, a city turned to ash and a resistance buried beneath it. Gaza was no longer just a place. It was a battlefield, a maze of broken buildings and tunnels beneath every step. Hamas didn't wait. They fought back with ambushes, traps, and shadows. From rooftops, from alleys, from underground, the city became a war zone, block by block, house by house, wall by wall. Civilians, still there, still trapped. Israeli planes dropped leaflets. Evacuate south. But where was safe in Gaza? The north was rubble. The south was overcrowded. The borders were sealed. There was nowhere to run. Nowhere left. In Jabalia, a refugee camp was hit. Israel claimed Hamas leaders were hiding there. But dozens of children were pulled from the debris. One boy, dust-covered, silent, just stared into the camera. He didn't cry. He had no tears left. In Shujaya, the fighting was nonstop. A mother said, "We prayed for silence." But silence never came. At Al-Quds Hospital, over 14,000 people were sheltering. Then came the warnings. Evacuate or risk the consequences. But the hospital had no fuel, no ambulances, no way out. Doctors operated without anesthesia. Premature babies were lined up in blankets. Because the incubators had stopped, a nurse whispered, "We're not saving lives anymore. We're just delaying death." Israel called the invasion necessary, to destroy tunnels, to destroy Hamas. But in the process, Gaza itself was being erased. Every street was a front line. Every home, potential cover. Every life caught in between. The world watched. Protests erupted in London, Paris, New York, Cairo. Millions marched. Some demanded justice for Israel. Others cried out for Gaza. Everyone had a side. But inside Gaza, no one had a choice. A Palestinian boy said, "I dream of water. I dream of food. I dream of sleep without bombs." In Tel Aviv, posters of kidnapped Israelis lined the streets. Families lit candles, watched the news, and waited. Some began asking, when does defense become destruction? By mid-November, over 11,000 Palestinians killed, more than 4,500 of them children. 1,400 Israelis had died. 239 hostages remained inside Gaza, and still the fighting continued. In a city with no power, no clean water, no medicine, no safe place, only one thing spread: smoke. A little girl found a photo in the rubble. Her parents, smiling before the war. She held it close. It was the only thing left that wasn't broken. This wasn't just war. This was punishment on both sides. And the world? Still silent, still watching, still waiting. Next time, Part 5, Hostages and Humanity. One moment, one exchange, and a spark of hope in the darkest hour. Sometimes, even in war, there's a pause, a breath, a fragile moment where humanity tries to return. This is that moment. After weeks of bloodshed, one question haunted every home in Israel. Where are the hostages? October 7th had left scars, deep and raw. But 239 families had no graves to mourn. Their loved ones were still alive, somewhere in Gaza. Children, grandparents, entire families taken from their homes, dragged across the border, vanished into the dark. In Israel, posters covered every wall. Faces of the missing, aged 9 months to 85 years. Vigils were held daily. Candles flickered. Names whispered. Tears flowed. One father said, "I can't eat. I can't sleep. I just want to know, is she warm? Is she hurt? Is she alive?" But inside Gaza, another kind of horror was unfolding. Thousands of Palestinians were now prisoners too, detained, some without trial, some just children. Their families waited in silence for names that never came. And then something shifted. November 24th, 2023. A deal, fragile, controversial, but real. A temporary ceasefire, a 4-day pause. In exchange, 50 Israeli hostages, 150 Palestinian prisoners. The world held its breath. On day 1, the first names were called. A 5-year-old girl, a teenage boy, an elderly woman who hadn't spoken since the night she was taken. They were returned, shaken, thin, silent. Some smiled, some wept, some just stared. Israel cheered. Families rushed forward. Soldiers saluted. For a moment, hope returned. And in Ramallah, in Bethlehem, in Gaza's south, Palestinian mothers waited too. When the buses arrived, crowds gathered. Tears, cheers, chants. Young men stepped off in prison uniforms. Boys kissed the ground. Fathers collapsed into sons' arms. 2 sides, 2 truths, 2 kinds of reunion. But the ceasefire was delicate, every hour uncertain. On the 3rd night, tensions flared. Missiles were reported. Talks nearly collapsed. But the world pushed hard. Hold. Pause. By the end of 7 days, 110 hostages freed, 240 Palestinians released. But many remained. One Israeli woman said, "My son came home, but my neighbor's daughter didn't." One Palestinian father said, "My boy was freed, but he returned a stranger." And in Gaza, the brief silence let the world see what war had done. Entire blocks reduced to gray powder. Children played in cratered streets. People lined up for water that didn't exist. The pause didn't end the war, but it revealed something else, that even enemies still carry pieces of humanity. A soldier gave a child a biscuit. A former hostage hugged a medic. A prisoner kissed his mother's hand and cried. Loop, soft pause. Maybe peace doesn't begin with power. Maybe it begins with return. But the truce didn't last. On day 8, the bombs returned. The tanks moved forward. The war came back. Louder, harder, hungrier. The exchange was over. The moment gone. But for one brief week, a light flickered. A hand reached the crossfire. And 2 sides, soaked in grief, remembered what it meant to come home. In the next part, the South burns. As the war expands, Rafah becomes a last refuge. And the next target, when you've lost your home, you search for shelter. when every city is shattered. You look south, but in Gaza, even the last safe place was never safe. Opening, quiet, eerie tone. Rafah, southern Gaza, the final corner, the last line. It was supposed to be a haven, a refuge, a zone marked safe. More than 1.5 million people flooded south, crowding into tents. Schools, mosques, ruins. Families shared water bottles. Children slept in doorways. Hospitals overflowed. Food was rare. Hope was rarer. But people still believed that here, maybe they would be spared. Then came the tanks. February 2024. Israel pushed south. Rafah was next. The warnings came first. Texts, leaflets, phone calls. Evacuate Rafah. Military operation imminent. But where to go? There was nothing left. The north was in ruins. The borders were shut. Gaza had no corner untouched. On February 11th, Israeli forces began their assault. Airstrikes, shelling, then boots on the ground. Rafah shook. The sky lit up again. People ran again. But this time, there was nowhere to run. A father carried 2 children, barefoot, through smoke. One was breathing. The other wasn't. He didn't stop. In a tent city built from plastic and blankets, fire swept through rows of families, burned beyond recognition. Charred toys, blackened strollers. A woman screamed. This was our safe place. This was all we had left. Loop, haunting rhythm. What happens when the last shelter becomes the next target? Israel claimed Hamas leaders were hiding in Rafah, weapons stored in homes, fighters using tunnels beneath tents. The goal, eliminate the enemy. But in the crossfire, thousands more civilians were lost. The border with Egypt became a flashpoint. Aid trucks lined up, waiting. Inside Gaza, babies starved. Medicines expired. The world began to crack. The UN pleaded. A full-scale operation in Rafah would be catastrophic. President after president warned, don't do this. But the offensive continued. By March 2024, over 35,000 Palestinians killed, more than 70% of homes destroyed, over 1 million now displaced twice. In Rafah, people dug through rubble with kitchen spoons. Injured children waited for ambulances that never came. Doctors treated wounds with vinegar. A girl looked into the camera and said, "We don't cry anymore. We've run out of tears." And still, rockets flew out of Gaza. Still, Hamas resisted. Still, Israel pushed deeper. The cycle refused to break. Narrator softens. Human moment. But beneath the violence were still people. A man shared his last piece of bread. A child found a kitten in the rubble and held it like treasure. A mother sang lullabies over the sound of drones. Even here, even now, humanity refused to vanish. And yet, Rafah burned. Loop, heavy ending tone. The last refuge had become the final battlefield. And the world? Still debating, still watching, still waiting. In the next part, no exit, Gaza is sealed shut. The world speaks in silence. And a new chapter begins, survival without escape. You can leave a war zone. If the borders are open, if the planes still fly, if someone lets you go. But in Gaza, there is no way out. Only in. November 2023 onwards, Gaza became the largest open-air prison on Earth. Airstrikes above, tanks on the ground, borders locked from every side. To the north, Israeli forces. To the south, Egypt's Rafah crossing, closed. To the sea, blockade. To the sky, drones. 2.3 million people were trapped, not for days, not for weeks, but for months. A Palestinian man said, "We're not waiting to die. We're waiting to stop surviving." Pause, soft music tone. In Khan Yunis, tents stood in floodwater. Children coughed from mold. Flies covered the wounds of the wounded. A mother melted plastic to cook rice. It smelled like poison. She fed her children anyway. Hospitals had no fuel. Surgeons used flashlights. Ambulances ran on prayer. A reporter whispered, "It's no longer a war zone. It's a graveyard waiting to be filled. The borders didn't just keep people in, they kept the world out. Food? Delayed. Medicine? Stuck in trucks. Water? Contaminated. Electricity? Gone. Children drew pictures of bombs instead of butterflies. They knew the sound of drones better than birds. One boy said, "I don't want to grow up, because that means I'll still be here." Loop, emotional rise. And the world? Still divided. Still arguing. Still silent. Outside Gaza, people marched. Ceasefire now. Free Palestine. Bring them home. But the walls held firm. And inside, life slipped away. A UN aid worker said, "We know where the hungry are. We just can't reach them." And still people lived. A girl smiled as she washed clothes in a bucket. A father told stories by candlelight. A teacher held class in the rubble of a mosque. Even without an exit, people chose to keep going. Because when freedom is denied, even breathing becomes resistance. Soft close. There was no escape, no safety, no light at the end. Just endurance, just survival, just the next day and the will to reach it. In the next part, the world watches. From UN chambers to college campuses, the war inside Gaza's echoed across the globe. But does outrage mean change? Or is the world only watching? While Gaza burned, the world watched. On screens, in headlines, in whispers, in protests. This was not a hidden war. It was live-streamed. It was uploaded. It was undeniable. And yet, still continued. Cut to scenes around the world. In New York, people filled Times Square with candles. In London, 500,000 marched through rain for a ceasefire. In Istanbul, flags waved and chants shook the streets. In Cape Town, in Jakarta, in Karachi, millions raised their voices. Signs read, "Stop the war. Free Palestine. Peace is not a crime." Social media exploded. Hashtags, footage, grief, rage. But in the chambers of power, silence often echoed louder. The United Nations debated. Resolutions were proposed, vetoed, watered down, dismissed. World leaders spoke carefully, some with empathy, some with denial, most with distance. Loop, soft transition. In one corner of the world, children screamed under rubble. In another, politicians argued over words. Israel called it self-defense. Palestinians called it survival. Others called it genocide. But no one stopped it. A student in Boston said, "I grew up learning never again. Now I watch it happening again." Universities erupted. Students occupied campuses, demanded divestment, faced arrests. Jewish voices split. Some stood with Israel, grieving their dead. Others stood with Gaza, mourning shared pain. A rabbi in Berlin said, "To be Jewish is to remember pain. To forget another people's suffering is to forget our own." Muslims, Christians, atheists marched together. Artists refused to perform. Writers returned awards. Voices rose. But still, Gaza burned. Soft pause, heavy emotional pull. What good is awareness? Without action, what good are prayers? Without pressure, aid convoys were blocked. Journalists killed. Hospitals bombed. Still the cameras rolled. One reporter said, "This is not just a war. It's a test of humanity, of morality, of memory." And yet, even as the bombs fell, voices multiplied. A woman in Paris wrote, "My government stays silent, but my soul won't." In South Africa, courts called it genocide. In The Hague, the world listened, in silence and in shame. Loop, narrator voice slow and steady. The world was watching. The world is still watching. But the people inside Gaza, they were not watching. They were living it. No water, no medicine, no escape, and now, no faith in the outside world. A Palestinian poet wrote, "We are the question the world won't answer." And yet, the voices kept rising, in resistance, in grief, in love, because even if the world only watches, the people inside still live, still die, still hope. In the next part, the children of the dust, born under bombs, raised among ruins. Gaza's children carry the war in their bones, and still they dream. In some parts of the world, children draw flowers. In Gaza, they draw tanks. In most cities, children play in parks. In Gaza, they play beside craters. This is not childhood. This is survival. A generation born under siege, raised beneath drones, baptized by rubble. They do not know a world without checkpoints, without fear, without mourning. A girl named Reem was 6 years old. She had never seen the sea, even though it was just 4 miles away, because to get there meant crossing death. She once asked, "Is the sun safe, or will it fall too?" Pause, soft breath. More than 50% of Gaza's population are children, and yet they've seen more funerals than birthdays. They speak the language of war. Apache, F-16, occupation, martyr. They know what phosphorus smells like. They can tell the difference between a surveillance drone and a missile-carrying one. But they also smile. They also dream, even in tents, even in ashes. A boy drew a picture of a house, with a roof, with a tree, with no hole in the wall. He called it My Future. Loop, soft inspirational tone. Teachers still teach, even without chalkboards, even under tarpaulin roofs. One teacher used sand to draw the alphabet. She said, "If they take the school, we'll use the earth." Doctors tell jokes to children as they stitch shrapnel wounds. Mothers sing lullabies louder than bombs. Fathers tell fairy tales made from shattered bricks. This isn't just resistance. It's defiance with crayons. It's hope under fire. UNICEF called Gaza a graveyard for children. But the children, they call it home. A 10-year-old boy stood beside the ruins of a school and said, "I will rebuild it when I grow up." How does a child carry grief so young? How do they still laugh? Still play? Still draw skies, even without stars? Silence, one beat. In Gaza, being a child is a risk. But being a child with hope, that's a revolution. A girl named Malik lost both parents. She whispered, "They're in heaven now. When I sleep, I see them smile." And yet, she shared her only blanket with a stray kitten. Even in this darkness, even under this dust, the light of these children refuses to die. Loop, rising music. They are not just victims. They are witnesses. They are the future. If they survive, they will remember everything. They will remember the silence of the world. They will remember the love of their mothers. They will remember that they smiled even when everything else broke. And one day, if there is peace, they will be the ones to build it. In the next part, buried truth, the battle for narrative. Who controls the story? Who owns the truth? In the age of cameras and algorithms, even war has a script, and not everyone gets to write it. In every war, there are 2 battles, one for land and one for truth. In Gaza, the truth is buried, under rubble, under fear, under headlines. You see the fire, you hear the cries, but what you believe, that's shaped elsewhere. Cut, calm, direct tone. The war in Gaza is not just on the ground. It is on screens, in hashtags, in press rooms. Every image is questioned. Every witness is doubted. Every child becomes a data point in someone else's argument. A journalist risks their life and is told this can't be verified. A mother shows her burned child and hears it's propaganda. Soft loop, rising tension. Who controls the narrative, controls the memory. Israel calls a fight against terror. Palestinians call a fight for survival. The world chooses sides, but often not based on facts. Facts are filtered through language, through politics, through bias. Bombs fall, but it's the words that decide who is right. Airstrike kills militants. No mention of the children. Collateral damage. No mention of the names. No proof. No mention of the power that erased the proof. Seen journalists inside Gaza. There are few left, many killed, others silenced, some still reporting, on mobile phones, in whispers, in tears. One journalist wrote his last post. If I die, let it be known, I was telling the truth. Still, the world scrolls past. Still, algorithms shadow ban the dead. Still, war crimes trend, then disappear. Social media becomes a battlefield. Videos removed, accounts suspended, entire voices erased. And yet millions still try to show, to speak, to share, because they know if the world doesn't see it, the world won't stop it. Loop, narrator slows, emotional pause. In history books, wars are often written by the victors. But in Gaza, who is left or right, a child's body is found under stone. No headline, no outrage, no justice. But his name is whispered, his picture is saved, and somewhere someone sees and remembers. Because truth is not a weapon, it is a witness. And when the world forgets, truth waits. In photos hidden on phones, in stories passed down, in scars that never fade. Soft fade out. Gaza may be silenced, but the silence itself speaks. In the next part, scars and soil, rebuilding the unseen. After war, there is always rubble. But what about the rubble inside people? What does it take to rebuild not just cities, but souls? When the bombs stop falling, the war doesn't end. It just changes shape. The buildings can be rebuilt, streets cleared, walls raised again. But what about the people? What about the child who no longer speaks? The mother who sets 5 plates, but only has 2 children left? Scars don't just live on the skin. They live in silence, in memories, in the way a boy flinches at thunder, because it sounds like an airstrike. Slow, beat, gentle tone. In Gaza, after the dust settles, another kind of war begins. The war inside. Doctors return to empty hospitals. Teachers open schools with missing students. Families visit homes that are only outlines in ash. Some carry rubble in their hands. Others carry it in their hearts. A teenager writes poetry on cardboard. A widow grows mint in a plastic bottle. A boy builds a kite from bomb wrappers. They are rebuilding, not because they are healed, but because they must. Midsection, deeper emotional pull. Grief in Gaza is no funeral. It is daily. It is shared. It is inherited. There is no therapy in the camps. No quiet room for trauma. So people stitch their souls with routine. Boiling tea, hanging clothes, telling stories. A man says, "We can't cry forever. We have to plant something." And so they do. In sand, in cracks, in shoes. They plant herbs. They plant tomatoes. They plant hope. Because even in the soil of war, life pushes through. Loop, rising voice, hopeful tempo. This is not recovery. This is resurrection. The boy who lost his leg plays soccer again. The girl who lost her brother learns to paint his face from memory. A mother starts writing down names. Every name she can remember. That's how nations survive. Not by bullets, but by remembering, by rebuilding. But healing is slow. It has no camera crew, no breaking news headline. It is quiet. It is painful. It is powerful. Closing, soft tone, emotional but calm. One brick at a time. One meal. One smile. One step forward, even if limping. And maybe, just maybe, one day, Gaza won't just be a place that endured war. It'll be a place that taught the world how to rise after it. In the next part, ceasefire or silence. What does peace really mean? The bombs stop. But is that peace? Or just a pause? When the world says enough, but justice is still missing. Is it truly peace? The bomb stopped. The skies went quiet. And the headline said, "Ceasefire declared." But on the ground, it didn't feel like peace. It felt like a pause. Pause, soft piano. A woman walked through the ruins of her home. The walls weren't there. Her children weren't either. But the war was over. What do you call it when the killing stops, but the pain stays? Loop, narrator slows down. Peace is not silence. It is not the absence of bombs. It is the presence of justice, of dignity, of return. In Gaza, ceasefire does not mean freedom. It means No more airstrikes for now. No more burials for today. But no water, no electricity, no reconstruction, no future. Soft music builds. The borders remain closed. The blockade stays. The surveillance drones still hover. The fear still lives in every heartbeat. This is not peace. This is survival. Under permission, a father said, "The war ended, but I still whisper when I speak." The world moves on. News cycles shift. Aid dries up. The cameras leave. But Gaza remains, frozen in the wreckage of unresolved pain. Transition, deeper tone. They call it a ceasefire, but fire still burns in the memories, in the trauma, in the empty chairs. A ceasefire is paper. Peace is people. Peace is not just a word to be signed. It's a life to be lived. It's rebuilding homes without fear of their destruction. It's raising children without rehearsing escape routes. It's sleeping through the night without checking the sky. Moment of reflection. A ceasefire ends a noise. But peace heals a wound. And Gaza, it doesn't want your silence. It wants your solidarity. Because silence, too, is a weapon. And peace that comes without truth is just another kind of war. Final lines, slow, emotional delivery. So ask yourself, when they say the war is over, do they mean the killing stopped or that they've stopped counting? Because for Gaza, real peace has not yet arrived. Only the waiting. In the next part, a land of memory. Stories that refuse to die. Long after bombs fall silent, stories still speak. We look at the lives lost, the voices unheard, and ask, who will remember when the world forgets? Some wars end, but some places never stop remembering. Gaza is more than a strip of land. It is a library of memory. Every corner holds a story. Every broken brick remembers a name. Soft piano begins. They tried to bury the voices with bombs, with silence, with denial. But stories have a way of surviving, even in ashes. A grandmother still tells her grandchildren about the village that once was, the fig tree she planted, the stream that no longer flows. A child draws a house he has never seen, but he draws it from memory, because memory is inherited, like blood. In Gaza, they don't just mourn. They archive, in songs, in poems, in whispered names before sleep. Short pause, softer tone. They remember the boy who used to sell candy, the girl who wanted to be a doctor, the uncle who made everyone laugh, until he disappeared beneath rubble. Memory is resistance, because when you are forgotten, you are erased. But Gaza refuses to be erased. Its people write history with their breath, with their survival. Background sound fades, shift in tone, warm, strong. They remember even when the world looks away, even when the cameras leave, even when the hashtags vanish. Because if they don't remember, who will? The names live in notebooks, in phone contacts that will never pick up, in graves with no markers. Narration slows, deeper voice. A land may be occupied, but memory cannot be fenced. It crosses checkpoints. It slips through borders. It outlives the barrel of a gun. They say history is written by the victors. But in Gaza, it's written by the survivors. The world forgets dates, but Gaza remembers faces. A mother runs her hand over a scorch wall. "This was my son's height," she says. And suddenly, that wall becomes a shrine. Soft fade-out music begins. In Gaza, memory is not just a past. It is the only thing they're allowed to carry into the future. So, listen, because these stories, they are still speaking, even when the world is not. In the next part, unarmed, the price of breathing free. What does freedom cost when you're unarmed? What does courage look like when all you have is your voice and a flag no one wants to see? What does it mean to resist when you have no weapons, no tanks, no jets, no iron domes, just a flag, a voice, and the will to stand? Subtle heartbeat begins. In Gaza, children throw stones, not out of hate, but out of desperation, out of the hunger to be seen. A teenager waves a flag and is labeled a threat. Shot, Silenced. What kind of world fears an unarmed boy? What kind of war calls a kite a weapon? Pause, softer voice. She stood at the fence, eyes wide, hands empty. She didn't shout. She simply stared back. That was her resistance. Breathing becomes defiance when someone else decides. If you deserve to breathe. In Gaza, they walk forward, even when they know what's waiting. Rubber bullets, tear gas, live fire. Still, they march, because surrender is another kind of death. Midsection, slow, deep tone. The price of freedom here is not paid in treaties. It's paid in funerals, in amputations, in silence. And yet, every protest, every prayer, every child holding a handmade sign says one thing: I exist. Loop, more intensity builds slowly. They have no lobby, no billion-dollar defense systems, no voice in global halls. But they have something even stronger: memory, faith, and the unbreakable belief that dignity is worth dying for. They are unarmed, but not weak. They are cornered, but not conquered. Reflective tone, to resist without weapons, is the purest form of courage. To die for freedom, that may never come in your lifetime, is the clearest definition of honor. Final lines, slow, soft, fading tone. They ask for justice. They receive bullets. They ask for air. They receive walls. And still, they stand, because breathing in Gaza is an act of rebellion. In the next part, the children left behind, echoes of a stolen childhood. What happens to children who grow up under drones? What becomes a play of school, of innocence, when war is all they've ever known? They were born into sirens, raised under drones, rocked to sleep by explosions, and woke up to funerals. These are the children of war, not soldiers, not fighters, just children. They should be drawing in notebooks, but they draw tanks. They should be playing tag, but they run from shadows. They should be learning alphabets, but they've memorized evacuation codes. Pause. Gentle piano begins. In Gaza, childhood is not a promise. It is a question. Will I make it to tomorrow? A 7-year-old boy knows the sound of a drone better than the sound of an ice cream truck. A 10-year-old girl folds bandages instead of paper cranes. The playground is shattered, the classroom buried, the lullabies now replaced with air raid sirens. They grow up fast, but not by choice. They carry trauma in tiny hands. Hands meant for coloring, not for burying brothers. Soft breath, emotional tone rises slightly. When asked what they want to be when they grow up, some say, I just want to grow up. That's it. Not a doctor, not a teacher, just alive. Midsection, slow, heart-wrenching rhythm. Some don't speak at all. They've seen too much, heard too much, lost too much. The war didn't just steal their homes. It stole their birthdays, their toys, their sense of safety. But still they draw, still they sing, still they laugh for a moment, because even shattered hearts try to beat like they once did. Loop, hopeful undertone begins faintly. One child uses chalk on broken walls. Another ties ribbons to burned trees. A little girl plants sunflower seeds next to a crater. They are saying, we are still here. We still dream. They are not just victims. They are the soul of Gaza, the heartbeat that refuses to stop. Closing, calm, emotional voice. They were never given a childhood, but they deserve a future. And that future cannot come through silence. It must come through truth, through memory, through the voices that refuse to forget them. Because even when the world moves on, their echoes remain in every drawing, in every tear, in every whispered bedtime story about peace. In the next part, cameras, clicks, and cowardice. When the world watched and did nothing, the footage was there. The images were shared, but hearts stayed numb. When injustice went viral, and still nothing changed. The cameras were there. The footage was live. The images were clear. The cries were loud. The world watched and did nothing. Brief pause, heavy tone. A child pulled from rubble. A mother screaming beside a lifeless body. A journalist's last breath captured on livestream. Millions saw it. And then they scrolled past. Hashtags trended. Filters changed. Flags were posted. And then silence. What happens when pain becomes content? When suffering turns into a shareable moment? A story? A swipe? Pause, softer voice. Gaza became a screen. Not a place. Not a people. A screen. Flashes of horror. Brief outrage. Then back to selfies. Back to sales. Back to silence. They say, we didn't know. But they did. They saw the child with no legs. They saw the school reduced to dust. They saw doctors crying over bodies. They saw it all. Build tension. Firm tone. Knowing and doing nothing. That is cowardice. That is complicity. A camera can capture injustice, but it cannot stop it. Not alone. Views don't save lives. Likes don't stop bombs. The world watched, not as witnesses, but as spectators. Quiet shift, deeper reflection. Imagine watching a house burn, with people inside, and calling it heartbreaking, instead of calling for help. That is what happened. And every time you looked away, they remembered, because they had no choice. They did not get to scroll past war. They live in it. Low, haunting background. Cameras were pointed at Gaza, but the lens never protected them. It just recorded the fall. Again, and again, and again. Soft breath, gentle, pain delivery. What good is seeing if it doesn't move your heart? What good is knowing if it doesn't move your hands? The world watched. The world knew, but the world did not act. And that was a choice. Closing, slow, final words. They say history will judge us, but Gaza already has. In the next part, scars in the soil, when the land remembers more than the living. What if the ground beneath our feet remembers every drop of blood spilled on it? What if land itself carries grief? What if land could speak? Would it whisper? Would it scream? Or would it simply weep? This soil has seen too much. Too many feet have run across it in fear. Too many bodies have fallen into it, still warm. Too many names have been buried, without markers. The land remembers. It remembers laughter, interrupted by airstrikes. It remembers harvests, burned before they could be eaten. It remembers where the olive trees once stood and where the tanks rolled in. Soft drum pulse, heartbeat of the earth. In Gaza, even the ground carries grief. It has been tilled with sorrow, watered with tears, shattered by missiles, flattened by machines. And still, it breathes. Still, the fig tree grows again. Still, the weeds push through broken roads. Still, seeds are planted by hands that believe in tomorrow. But the scars, they never vanish. You can rebuild a wall. You can sweep away rubble. But how do you heal the memory of where your child died? Narration slows, quiet and pained. A father walks a field. This was where we used to play, he says. Now, it is cratered, blackened, silent. The soil holds the weight of history, and it never forgets. Rising emotion, deep and warm tone. Each step taken here is a walk across a graveyard of dreams. Each breath drawn here is shared with ghosts. But this is not a place of only death. It is a place of persistence, of people who love a land that keeps losing pieces of itself. They say, leave. But how do you leave the place where your mother is buried, where your child was born, where your heartbeat first echoed? This land is not just geography. It is identity. It is memory. It is home, even when bombed, even when burned, even when broken. It remains. And so do they. Closing, soft fading voice. Because in Gaza, even the earth remembers. And it is not done speaking. In the next part, when the sky turned hostile, living beneath machines of war. What happens when the sky above you becomes a threat? When clouds no longer mean rain, but rockets? Once, the sky meant rain, meant seasons, meant stars. Now, it means fear. In Gaza, People don't look up for beauty. They look up to survive. Because now, the sky is no longer a shelter. It is a weapon. Pause. Soft ticking sound begins faintly. Drones buzz like flies over rooftops. All day, all night, watching, waiting. Their sound never leaves. Even when they do, a clear blue sky should bring peace. But here, it brings dread. Because blue skies mean the planes can see clearly. And that means something is coming. Emotional shift, calm, heavy tone. A child sees a shadow across the courtyard. She freezes. It might be a bird. It might be a bomb. Imagine that. A childhood where every shadow could be your last. They live beneath a sky that can strike without warning, where silence isn't safety. It's suspense. Deep breath, building intensity. And when the sound comes, it comes fast. A whoosh, a whistle, then nothing, then dust, then screams. How do you explain this to a child? That the sky, the very place they're told heaven lives, is now the reason they pray. Just to survive the night? Pause. Soft piano begins. Windows are taped in excess. Beds are pulled away from glass. Children sleep in hallways, not because it's comfortable, but because it's safer. If there is such a thing anymore, soft, steady tone. The sky should not be feared. It should not carry fire. It should not decide who lives and who doesn't. But in Gaza, you can't dream under stars because they're hidden behind smoke, behind machines that do not feel. Closing, tender but firm tone. They did not ask for this sky. They did not choose this war. But still, they wake up each day and dare to live beneath it. And that is its own kind of bravery. In the next part, tears in the rubble, what is left when the walls fall? The bombs stop. The cameras leave. But what happens to the lives shattered in silence? To the homes that are never rebuilt? To the people left to pick up pieces of themselves? When the bombs stop, it doesn't mean the war is over. It just means the noise has ended. The silence. That's where the real pain begins. No more sirens. No more fire. Just dust and tears and silence that screams louder than any blast. Pause. Gentle wind sound. A man stands where his kitchen once was. He finds a spoon, a child's shoe, half a family photo, burned at the edge. This is what's left of home. Softer voice, reflective tone. They say, rebuild. But how do you rebuild? When your mother was a foundation, when your child was a roof, the walls can be replaced, but the warmth inside them? Gone. In Gaza, rubble is more than concrete. It's memory, love, laughter, now buried beneath broken bricks. A girl walks barefoot through the remains of her bedroom, the ceiling gone, the bed twisted, but she looks for her notebook. Hope is a stubborn thing. Midsection, deep tone, building emotion. No camera catches this part. The part after the airstrikes. When people sweep up shattered plates with trembling hands. When they bury neighbors with borrowed shovels. When they cry quietly because the children are watching. You see, war isn't just about the moment of destruction. It's about the long, quiet moments after, when survival feels like a curse. There are no more headlines, no more breaking news. But the pain? It lingers. Softer, haunting tone. They pick through the rubble, not just for belongings, but for pieces of themselves. A wedding ring, a Quran, a child's toy. Each one, a wound reopened, a memory that refuses to die. Closing, slow and emotional. What is left when the walls fall? Courage, scars, unanswered prayers, but also a quiet, relentless will to live. Because in Gaza, even after the world forgets, they rise from dust, from grief, from nothing, and they begin again. In the next part, the anatomy of occupation, borders built with fear. Not all prisons have bars. Some are built with walls, permits, and checkpoints. Some keep people locked in without ever touching them. Not all prisons have steel bars. Some are made of walls. of checkpoints, of silence, of rules that shift like sand, and lives trapped beneath them. This is not freedom. This is management. A system not of protection, but of control. Pause. Tense tone begins to build. You can leave your home, but only if the permit says so. You can cross that street, but only on Tuesday. You can seek medicine, but not too far, not too fast, not too loud. You must ask permission to live, and sometimes permission is denied. No explanation, no reason, just no. Calm, cold narration tone. Gaza is a strip, but it is not just land. It is a sealed bottle, tightly capped, shaken often, never opened. People call it a border, but it doesn't keep danger out. It keeps dignity in. Trapped, soft breath, emotional undertone returns. Children grow up never seeing what's beyond the fence, not because it's too far, but because it's forbidden. Their world ends where the wire begins. Firm tone, gentle anger, composed pain. You cannot fly. You cannot sail. You cannot drive freely. You cannot choose when to be safe. Occupation isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just the sound of a door that never opens. You want to study abroad? Apply for a permit. Need surgery? Wait for clearance. Want to visit your dying parent? Check the list. And sometimes the answer comes too late. Pause. Somber mood deepens. This isn't security. It's suffocation. Security doesn't deny water. It doesn't delay ambulances. It doesn't shoot first. And question never. This is a blueprint, a design, a system with gears and maps and forms, all made to exhaust, to erase, to control. Closing, slow, deliberate voice. Some prisons are concrete. Some are invisible, but both can destroy the soul. And in Gaza, the walls don't just hold people in. They hold the world out. In the next part, breaking point, how long can a cage people breathe? Every system has a limit. Every breath held must eventually be exhaled. What happens when hope has nowhere left to go? Every breath has a limit. Every wound, a threshold. Every silence eventually breaks. How long can you hold your breath before your lungs scream for air? How long can you live in fear before fear turns into fire? Gaza's been breathing through barbed wire, choking on dust, gasping beneath drones. And still, it breathes. But breath is not the same as life. Slow drum pulse begins. Low, steady beat. They say, stay calm. Be peaceful. Wait. But wait for what? Permission to dream? A green light to exist? A cage doesn't break from the outside. It breaks from pressure within. Pause. Voice firm but steady. Generations have grown up, knowing only blockade, only grief, only headlines that never bring change. Hope doesn't die in a moment. It fades. One denied permit, one empty fridge, one funeral at a time. But when there is nothing left to lose, people do not stay silent. When you push a people to the edge of existence, they will not fall. They will leap. Midsection, emotional rise begins, not because they want war, but because they want breath, not because they seek blood, but because they want dignity. You cannot cage a people forever, not without consequence, not without awakening something that no amount of force can bury. Soft shift, low piano enters. We ask, why do they resist? Maybe the better question is, why have they waited this long? What would you do if your every breath was counted by someone else? Tense pause, softer voice, heavy. They say, violence is never the answer. But they forget, violence was the question first. Walls were built, water was cut, farms were burned, children were shot, and still they said, wait. Closing, slow, powerful ending tone. A people can only bleed for so long before the blood becomes a voice. Gaza is not unbroken, but it is unbowed, and one day that breath they've been holding will roar. In the next part, echoes of the lost, stories buried beneath the rubble. Not every name makes the news, Not every cry is heard, but every soul lost leaves behind a story, and the dust remembers them all. Some names never reach the headlines. Some faces are never shown on screens. But they lived, they laughed, they loved, and they are gone. Not just numbers, not just casualties. Stories, interrupted, forever. Soft piano begins, light, sorrowful. A boy named Amir was learning to play the oud. He wanted to be a musician. His school was bombed. Miriam loved to paint. She had a sketchbook full of doves and sunsets. She died, clutching it. Yusef was a baker. He used to hum while kneading dough. The shop is rubble now. These are not statistics. They are pages, ripped out mid-sentence. Calm but aching narration. The world moves on. The headlines fade. But the echoes remain. A mother still sets out a plate for the child, who won't return. A brother still checks his phone, hoping for a message that will never come. Grief in Gaza is not an event. It's a season that never ends. Midsection, slow rising emotion. The cemetery is full, not just with bodies, but with unfinished futures. Doctors, poets, dreamers, all turned to ash. And still, there is no justice, no closure, only silence and more graves. Reflective tone, gentle. They were not militants, not threats, not enemies. They were daughters and fathers. They were toddlers and teachers. They were people. And in Gaza, each loss is not just felt. It is carried, because when you bury someone with your bare hands, you never forget their weight. Quiet, somber pause. Ask the survivors, and they will tell you, every time I walk past their house, I hear them, I feel them, I miss them. These are the echoes of the lost. They hum in the wind. They rest in the ruins. They ache in the hearts of the living. Closing, quiet, heartfelt tone. You may not know their names, but remember this. They were here. They mattered, and they are missed. In the next part, the children of smoke growing up without a sky. What does it mean to be a child whose lullaby is sirens, whose sky is always gray, and whose dreams are shaped by survival? A child should know the names of stars, not missiles. A child should chase butterflies, not shelter. But in Gaza, childhood is something else. Low piano begins, gentle, broken rhythm. Here, children grow up with the sound of drones, buzzing constantly, above toys, above cribs, above dreams. They know the difference between the whistle of a bomb and the crack of gunfire, not from movies, but from memory. They do not ask for bedtime stories. They ask, will we die tonight? Pause, soft narration tone. Some draw tanks instead of trees. Some speak their first words in shelters, not playgrounds. They do not fear the dark. They fear the silence. Because in Gaza, silence often means something is coming. Voice slows, sadness deepens. School bags gather dust. Classrooms become ruins. Dreams shrink to the size of survival. You ask them what they want to be. They say, a doctor, so I can save my brother. A journalist, so I can show the truth. A bird, so I can fly away. Midsection, light tension builds. Some children have never seen a plane. That wasn't a threat. Never seen the sea, though it's just a few kilometers away. Never seen a clear sky, without fear beneath it. Their drawings are filled with fire. But still, some draw hearts. Some draw homes. Some still draw hope. Reflective pause. Emotional piano rises softly. What kind of world teaches children to run before they can read? What kind of sky hangs above them, heavy with metal instead of rain? Closing, voice firm, full of feeling. These children do not need our pity. They need their childhood back. Because no child should grow up under the weight of war. And no world that calls itself human should allow this to be normal. In the next part, whispers through the wall, life on the other side. What does it feel like to live just beyond the wall, to watch the suffering, and say nothing to hear the whispers, but never cross over, just beyond the wall. Life continues. Shops open. Cafes bustle. Children laugh without looking up. And yet, not far away, everything is different. Soft piano enters, light, uneasy notes. The wall is tall, but it cannot mute the echoes of drones, of grief, of prayers that beg for safety. You can hear it if you listen. Voice calm but heavy with thought. There are those who live just across the line. They sip coffee, scroll news, and whisper, "That's sad, but what can we do?" The wall doesn't just divide land. It divides empathy. It turns neighbors into strangers, witnesses into ghosts. Some see the smoke rise and change a channel. Some hear the bombs fall and turn up the volume. Some walk their dogs while sirens scream. Just out of sight, voice deepens, slow rhythm. Silence is not neutral. It is a choice. When you know and say nothing, you have chosen a side. Reflective pause, soft music continues. The wall is not just concrete. It's comfort, convenience, the ability to ignore suffering, because it is not your own. Midsection, voice gains clarity, calm strength. There are those on the other side who speak, who march, who resist silence, but many choose peace over truth, stability over justice, comfort over conscience. What they don't realize is the wall protects nothing. It only delays the cost, because when suffering is ignored, it grows. And one day, it knocks on every door, closing deep, intentional delivery. You can build a wall to keep the cries out, but you cannot wall in the weight of knowing. One day, the whispers will grow louder, the silence will crack, and every truth that was buried will rise. In the final part, until the dust settles, the unwritten future. After all the destruction, what remains? Is there a path to healing? Or just the echo of everything we refuse to face? When the bombs stop falling and the sky goes quiet, there is a moment, still, heavy, uncertain. It's not peace. It's the pause. After the storm, soft piano begins, sparse, reflective. The buildings are gone, but the memories remain. The graves are filled, but so are the hearts of the living. And now there is dust everywhere. Dust on the streets, dust in the lungs, dust in the soul. But within the dust, something else stirs. A hand reaching out, a voice trying to rebuild, a child picking up a book. From the rubble, voice deepens, gentle hope rising. Because even after all this, life whispers, begin again. What does healing look like in a place stitched together? With scars? What does hope mean to a people who have buried generations? Midsection, tone stronger, rising emotional pace. It means choosing to plant where fire once burned. It means teaching children not just how to survive, but how to dream again. It means building not just homes, but dignity, not just silence, but stories. And it means the world must not look away, because history will not ask when the war ended. It will ask, what did we do when the dust settled? Final reflections, slow, gentle fade. There are no winners in the ruins of war, only lessons buried beneath the ash, only voices waiting to be heard, only futures still unwritten.